Hi, everybody. I have the great honor to have the after the lunch slots. So, of course, there are no good slots, but this one is not that great. So I will try to be entertaining, captivating, fun, and meanwhile, try to teach you some stuff. I'm Nicolas Fränkel. For a long time, I was a developer, a team lead, an architect, or whatever. And then 5 years ago, I decided I had enough of projects, project managers, customers, schedules, crunches, whatever. So I decided, hey, I will become a developer advocate. That's my second time at GeeCON Prague, just for the fun. Last time, I also had an afternoon slot on Friday, and I nearly missed my flight. So, of course, this year I asked, hey, I have a flight, and they put me again on Friday afternoon. So if I don't stay after the talk, you will, please, I apologize already, but yeah, I'm already a bit stressed. You can follow me on all those places, although, well, I wouldn't recommend Twitter because, well, it's dying. For the questions, I encourage you to have your question on Slido, and here are the information, and if you have a phone, like a modern one, just use it. So if you came here, probably you are a bit aware or you're a bit interested in data residency. I love Wikipedia definitions. So basically, I mean, it's just a big blurb to tell you that your data, though it's digital, is stored somewhere physically, right? And it can create a lot of issues. Like, for example, at least there are two ways it can mess things up for you. And all are not technical related issues. Both are legal related issues. So first, some countries, they mandate that some or all data related to their citizen, their companies, their whatever, is hosted in some territory. And it seems, I was talking to a gentleman, it says it's worse than that. Perhaps I didn't list all of them, but at least those. If you have a single customer or you have a single company and you only operate in a single country, that's fine. As soon as you start operating in multiple countries, then you might have issues. Is anybody from the Czech Republic? Has the Czech Republic any laws regarding data? Nobody is from the Czech Republic. Yeah. Yes, you have laws. You had. You still have, okay. So they are missing here, right? Okay. I mean, I understand it's just partial, but yeah, it seems it's more. And then if you know that you are operating in a country, you know the laws of that country, well, it's not easy, but at least it's clear. Now, you've got the fun of the jurisdictional challenges. Imagine you are an EU company that manages the data of EU citizens. And then you decided, because you are very smart, to store the data in the EU, because, well, that's normal. But you use a US cloud provider who tells you everything is fine. Your data is on European soil. Yeah, the problem is this company is just a subsidiary of a US company. And the US company needs to abide by US laws. And one of those laws tells that, well, they need to give the data of anybody if something happens. Like there is a court issue or whatever, or the FBI or something, they need to give out the data. And so now you are between the hammer and the anvil. So the only sane resolution in this case is to say, okay, I won't use any US cloud provider, which is a pretty sane reaction, but not very realistic. Who is using Google Cloud? Okay, a couple of hands. AWS? Okay, more hands. Azure? Okay. Who is using only a European-based cloud provider? No hands. Well, you're in the right place then. So imagine you are in Malaysia, and Malaysia tells you that you need to host your stuff in Malaysia. Well, too bad. Nothing in Malaysia yet. So even if you want to be compliant, well, you cannot, because unless you go on-premise. Just for the coming soon part, which is here, I checked, it's still not opened. So why Malaysia? Because the first time I gave this talk was in Malaysia. So the only thing that we are left with is to partition our data. So we can have a single piece of software, I see you. I can have a single piece of software, and depending on the data itself, I can host it in one or more location. If you stay there, I will look at you all the time. And in general, when you hear, yeah, you must be much more discreet. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, but then let's still for like 20 minutes, so I forget. In general, when we talk about partitioning, we think about all those things, right? About round robin, about consistent hashing because the topology can change. We can add or remove nodes. So all the stuff about scaling, basically. But here, it's much, much simpler. We are just wanting to say, hey, if you belong in this country, your data belongs in this data store. If you belong in this country, in this data store. And that's all. So the problem here, we will simplify it already. Let's imagine we have only 2 locations. And with 2 locations, we can already see a lot of issues. So I have a client, and it needs to decide where to read and write data, depending on something. And we go through several components. The first is the API gateway, because I assume you have an API gateway. Then we have the server. Then we have the database. And for that, we have an algorithm that I invented myself. "20 years of experience into one slide. So let's decide if the country is US, go there. If the country is FR, yeah, it's France because I'm French. I need to show off a bit. And so now, as an architect, the question is, where do you put those 4 lines of very complex algorithm? Because you can put it anywhere you want. We can put it in the client. We can put it in the app. We can put it in the proxy, in an API gateway, anywhere. So let's check through all of them to understand what are the pros and the cons. First, in the client. So if you put some logic in the client, some routing logic in the client, it means now your client is a smart client. if you have dealt with smart clients before, you know that's not fun. The biggest issue is you need to know about the topology. And the problem of the topology is it changes. But, OK. And then the first time you send a request, you don't know the topology. So either you have a blank round on the first try to know about the topology, or you send the first request on any location, and somehow, when you receive the response, then you've got the topology with it. It's up to you. If you are a backend architect, then probably you would put everything on the backend, right? So if we put it there, the good thing is we are closer to the DB, so we can make more decisions that require additional data. Because the thing is, perhaps the request doesn't contain enough data, and we need to query more. And since we are closer to the DB, then this additional request is not expensive. Now the problem is you will need to code it, and, well, it's not that easy. There might be bugs. And the biggest problem at the end is if you are on the wrong lane, because for whatever reason you were like routed on the wrong API gateway, then you will need to cross the lane. And I imagine that those lanes are far apart and that there is a huge performance cost. So also not great. Then we have a slight variant, which basically is the same. So instead of having everything in the app, we have a proxy component that does the thing. You can imagine this is generic enough, so you can change the configuration much more easily. So on one side, we gain coupling. On the other side, we still have all the problems of the backend stuff. But we can also say, OK, it is better to make the decision as soon as possible to avoid crossing boundaries. So it's much better to go on the API gateway side. That's true. The good thing is the gateway knows about the topology by definition. So you probably already have mechanisms in place so that when the topology changes, your gateway knows about it. But the problem is if you need additional access to the data, then more expensive. So what's the solution? Lunchtime, right? Well, my proposal is we can try to be smart and have everything. We should have double computation. Let's say we forget about the smart client because it's a lot of issues. Let's say that the first request will hit any of the two endpoints. Whatever happens afterwards, the client will know the topology afterwards. And even if the topology changes, it's not an issue. I go further. Now, the second request queries the correct gateway. So if you are in France, if you are a French citizen, sorry, you will be like moved to the French gateway. If you are a US-based citizen, to the US-based gateway. So you already are in the right lane. The gateway computes the location based on the metadata that was trained previously. But now comes the problem. What if somebody hacked the metadata to give you wrong information? In order to avoid this, then the app computes the location again And in this case, if it's correct, and we assume that in like the majority of cases, nobody will change the metadata, then you are in the right lane, and you can continue forward. Or if somebody hacked the location, or you are on the wrong location because it's the first request and whatever happened, then you compute the correct location, and you redirect to the right lane, which is expensive, but doesn't happen in the majority of the cases. And so you are pretty well protected. And I don't know if you remember, a long, long time ago, we did the same when we had like client-side and server-side validation. We did client-side because we didn't want to have a round trip to the server to understand that the data was wrong. But we did server-side because somebody could bypass this client-side validation. So we did that both. The biggest difficulty was to have the rule in one single place. Who has coded in struts before, just for fun? Wow, so many old people. Does the struts validator rings a bell? Who remembers or knows or has used the struts validator? 1, 2, yeah, old people. Shell shock, but it was great. You coded your rule in one single place, and it was generated on the client and on the server. That really, really was useful. Great. So now I want to do some demo, because I've talked a lot. And I work on the Apache API 6 product, so I will use Apache stuff. Apache API 6, Apache sharding sphere. Who knows about Apache API 6 API gateway? Good. My boss will be happy, so I will take a picture. So, please, who knows about Apache API 6 API gateway? Everyone. No, nobody. So he knows that he sent me there for the right reason. If everybody knows, then what I'm doing here? Thanks. Good. What do you use for API gateway? APIG? Gravity? Kong? You are all developers, you don't care about API gateways? Nobody uses an API gateway. I just saw one hand for Kong. 2. Or perhaps it's the same person. Really, you are all developers. Come on, API gateways. Who here is an architect? APIG, thanks. Who here is an architect? Somebody is bold enough. What do you use for API gateway? Oh my God. Oh my God, okay. I have other talks where I explain what is an API gateway. You are in the wrong talk. But anyway, it's available online. API gateway, in very, very few words, is just like a reverse proxy on steroids that caters to APIs. Like if you have a reverse proxy, you probably have rate limiting to avoid like distributed denial of services attack. The problem is that you treat all the IPs, all the clients the same. Once you have APIs, you cannot treat every client the same because some of them might have paid a huge sum of money to get a higher threshold. And though it would be possible to code that in a C-module in Nginx, now you've got business logic inside of Nginx. Nginx is not very happy with business logic, especially since business logic changes very frequently. And in order to change the configuration of Nginx, what do? You switch it off and on again. When it's your entry point to an information system, it's not that great. So Apache API 6 is business logic friendly. It's based on Nginx because actually it's a very good and very mature reverse proxy. On top of that, you have OpenResty. OpenResty is a layer. It's a JIT Lua layer that allows you to change the configuration of Nginx dynamically through Lua scripts. And because well, we work in enterprise, we need structure, we need maintainability. Then we have a whole layer that allows you to have some abstraction and that everything can be configured through plugins. That's Apache API 6. On the other hand, you have Apache Sharding Sphere. I know much less about Apache Sharding Sphere, so please avoid many hard questions about Apache Sharding Sphere. Who knows about Apache Sharding Sphere? Wow, 2 projects in one. You really are in the right room. So its motto is, the idea is you can shard any database without the developer being much the wiser. It's done either through a JDBC data source, if you are using a Java application, that's good, or through a dedicated component proxy. Be careful. The documentation is not that developed yet, not that detailed, and sometimes it contains errors. So I am an Apache Sharding Sphere contributor because I made a small pull request to the documentation. How did I do that? Well, I had to read the code because what was written in the documentation didn't work. So as I mentioned, it's time for a demo. My demo will be much more limited. First thing, I won't store the metadata on the client, so no smart client, no nothing. Then I will have a single API gateway, because in that case, if I have a stupid client, it doesn't make sense to have multiple ones. I will always go to the same. I will have 2 apps and 2 databases. And then I will have a JVM-based app, Kotlin, Spring Boot, all those things you love. And I will be using Sharding Sphere via JDBC since, well, I'm using a Java app. So my very much simplified setup is the following. I have 1 client, I store nothing, it will always go to the same API gateway, and then depending on something, I will direct it either to one lane or to the other. And then afterwards, on the server, I will recompute again and make sure I get the right data. Do we agree on that? Wow. Do we agree on that? Thanks. It's very hard for me. I'm not from the US. I cannot warm the crowd. Okay, Docker compose app. And now it's, for whatever reason, I decided to be in resource saving mode, so I will probably wait for ages. Meanwhile, I will show you what's the architecture. If I have, I think last time it didn't work so great, but I have distributed tracing, just in case. I have API 6. I have the app Europe, as I mentioned. I have 2 apps, one deployed for Europe and the other deployed for USA. Then I have the DB Europe and the DB USA. Nothing amazing. As you can see, it's the same image. So it's the same app deployed to 2 different locations. And the only difference here is that one has the service name for OpenTelemetry USA, the other as Europe. Has this stuff started? Yes, it has started. Amazing. Now I have my crazy stuff, so I will just show you how it's supposed to work. It didn't start yet. Oh, it's in the process. OK. Anyway, my databases, they have the same schema. Well, the only difference is one, the schema is called USA, the other is called Europe, but the data structure, the table structure is the same. The difference lies in the data. So in the USA, we have John Wayne with his lasso. And in Europe, I have Jean Dujardin with his croissant. Every one of us has their different hero, right? Don't laugh, please. So here, I want to have data according to who I am. So if I curl localhost 9080 thingies, and I say 1, then it takes ages, and I've got my croissant. Now, if I get 2, I get John Wayne, and you can see it's much faster. Much, much faster. So how does it work? As I mentioned, the first step is we should first try to guess where it comes from on the API gateway side. My API gateway at the moment is configured like hot in a file, not in a database. So here are the routes. Thing is. So the same route. Then I have an expression that says, okay, if it matches thingies and it matches, if I have a HTTP header named x-country and if it equals to fr, then I send it to the upstream 1. If I have the same header but value is US, then I send it to the upstream 2. And by default, so I only have the URI, I have no matching expression, I send it to the upstream 1 because, well, whatever, I need to have something. And then the routes are the following: ID1 Europe, ID2 USA. So what happened when I just did this, right, is by default, I called the first one, and it went to Jean Dujardin. The second one went to John Wayne. So I got the correct data, but in one case, there was a mismatch, right? Because by default, I send everything to upstream 1, and the upstream 1 is, So it's here. I send everything to the upstream 1, and the upstream 1, as I mentioned, is Europe. And here I still got John Wayne. So I have corrected, I have fixed this wrong stuff on the sharding side. And here I need to go back to Docker Compose. I have defined a specific data source URL, which is not JDBC Postgres, even though I'm using Postgres. Let me remember, yeah, I'm using Postgres. I'm using a data source that is of sharding sphere type. And I put here where it's located. And it's located here. Sharding, ATC sharding, sorry. Config app sharding here. So this data source defines 2 data sources. One, Europe. So here, DB Europe, schema Europe. One, USA, DB USA, current USA. And here, I have defined my sharding rule. Remember I told you consistent hashing, blah, blah, blah. You don't care about any of this. Here, I have a sharding algorithm called by country. And the algorithm itself is in code which is hosted in my app. And as I mentioned, it's really like super hard to read. When sharding value is FR, send it to Europe. When it's US, send it to USA. So first, I go according to what is on the HTTP header. Most of the cases, it should work. If it doesn't work, then I fix it. And then I go to the right lane, so I made a round trip. But in general, it should work. In general, what should happen is that since you curl that, you curl this, you should have a header of type X country FR. And then if I make a mistake, you see, it's like slower, but I still get the data. And here it's only reading, but basically the write stuff is even simpler. And that's all, folks. Thanks for your attention. Everything is available on GitHub. And I have a dedicated link, so I can check how many people actually browse the link. It's still interesting. And yeah, if I got you interested in Apache API 6, please have a look. And now I will have a check at slide 2. Isn't double computation only optimization for costs, but not for complexity or code bugs, as the solution is more complicated? Well, yes, you introduce complexity because actually you need to implement the same thing in 2 different places. But is there any other choice? I thought I was clear that the problem is you have a single computation is either you try to have the decision very early and you miss data, or you have it very late. And in that case, you might be in the wrong lane and you need to go to the right lane again. So that's actually our... Sorry, I'm reading the next question. That's funny. That's actually the problem. Say either you need to have the best of both worlds, and in that case, you need to have the double computation, just as for the client and server validation before. You could tell me, but why don't we have just only client-side validation or server-side validation? Well, client-side, because we want to be as fast as possible and prevent and fail early, and server-side, because somebody could bypass by removing JavaScript or whatever. And here is the exact same parallel. Any reason why not Kong but API 6? Well, I could probably speak for hours on that, but I will give you one compelling argument, is that API 6 is fully Apache project managed. So it's up to you, but regarding the changing of licenses that we have seen recently in the industry, who hosted stuff on Insomnia? Nobody? Well, they just decided that now you need to log in. So the problem, if you have only a private company with no foundation, with no regulation, with whatever, you will be at the mercy of the change of politics of this organization, and it can change very, very fast. I will wait. I've got so many questions. So where do I say it's? Wait, I don't know where I already answered. Where are the questions I already answered? Already, you do it. You could tell me. I thought I needed to do something. Where did the country value in your correction mechanism come from? It was not part of your request, Jason, and that's a very good question. That's why I need to be close to the data, because in the second port, I need to have the location, and the location, if you look at the schema, the thingy itself has no location. The thingy has an order ID. It's only the owner ID that's the owner that has a country. So that's the reason why we have let validation, is because we are close to the data and we can check at this time. Sorry? That's the thing. I don't. I let Apache sharding sphere do the job. And I tried to read in the documentation how it worked, and I didn't find it, and I was too lazy to check in the code. Really, the documentation is super, super scarce. Basically, they just copy-pasted bits and pieces, and you are left to your own devices. So exactly how this does it, I cannot tell you, but for sure there is a database check because it needs to access the data. Yes, but then it's for reading. For writing, you are safe for that. API gateway sucks. Change my mind. Is it a trick question or is it really... what exactly is your point? Because suck is a non-technical argument. Who did? Look, front row guy. There are 3 persons like in the front row. Who said that? Yeah, okay. No, API, well, okay. The idea is, I don't understand the question, but I try to explain you the difference between an API gateway and a reverse proxy. So first, if you expose directly your services over the internet, you are crazy. You should always have at least a reverse proxy in front of your services, because you don't want to enforce authentication, rate limiting, whatever, in each of your app. This is a cross-cutting concern that can be handled like in a technical component. You don't want to bother your devs with that. And then, as I mentioned, the problem of reverse proxy, they were designed at a time where switching them off and on again was not an issue. They dislike business logic. Once you start delving into the realms of APIs, you cannot just say, I will rate limit everybody at the same rate. It's not possible. So that's business logic. Sorry for that. Can API 6 be used as a K8s ingress? The answer is yes, we offer this service. And we are also working on the Gateway API experimental spec. Why not use external service with good cache called by API gateway? Yeah, we can do whatever we want. That's just one way to do it. I have no other requirement in this stupid demo. Like every time you need to to design your architecture based on the context. Here is just a stupid demo, and I wanted to learn about Apache sharding sphere. It is generally important not to store Malaysian elsewhere. Or I could just duplicate Malaysian data to a server. But that's up to you to know it. That's where you are limited as a technical person. That's when you need to rely to a lawyer who takes responsibility. And because they don't want to take responsibility, probably they will be very, very protective of data. Because if they sign, yeah, you can do it, and if something bad happens, that's their signature. So you cannot decide, in this case, you need to handle that, to delegate it to somebody else. Any plans for API 7? Hey, that's a good joke, but actually it's not a joke because the company that employs me is called API 7, because it's so much better than 6. How do you recommend I fight pushback from the CISO when accessing a DB remotely? Who asked the question? Okay. We already had a bit of the talk yesterday, fighting the organization, right? Okay. Sorry, then I don't have good enough glasses. And my question about fighting organization, pushing back organization, politics, whatever. Yeah. I think I have good enough glasses, but I wanted to be polite. I didn't want to question your memory, right? In all of those cases, my behavior would be, can you stop the recording? No, you cannot. I would say, please, sir, I apologize, but I must leave your organization now. Because my behavior is, I don't want to waste my time talking about fighting inertia of the organization. The bigger the organization, the more inertia it has. The more public the organization, the more inertia it has, because it doesn't need to change to survive. And so working in those like big public organizations, and I did, is just super, super disappointing. Because instead of doing your job of implementing business value or helping the end user, you are trying to convince somebody who knows nothing about the subject that he should decide something else. So I'm sorry, but if you are in this kind of organization, either you are very, very patient, and like water, you erode the rock, or you vote with your feet. I am a firm believer in Darwinism. If all good people leave the bad organizations will wither and die, and the good organization will thrive. But it's my way. And then that's a perfectly good choice that you are paid for being disappointed. It's not my choice. I work in Switzerland. It's very hard. How about data separation? If you query US, you should not see French data. Yeah, that's the point. That's what I try to do. I don't understand the question. That I queried US and I got French data. Sorry, I don't understand the question. Next, I probably missed in the middle. Where was the correcting to the right location and how to know the right location where there are bunches of them? Well, so the correction happened there. Location was sharding. Like, that's where I implemented my crazy algorithm. If the sharding value is FR, go to Europe. If it's US, go to the USA. And the next stop. Where does, sorry, the sharding value? That's what Apache sharding sphere gives me. Not here, here, sharding. Actual data nodes, Europe owner, USA owner, and you say country. And the country is, schema here. So even though I'm querying thingies, and the thingy has no country, then I have the owner that has a country, and it's able to fix it. Well, who knows? Well, that's probably a problem of data cleanup. And as I mentioned, I didn't check the code itself. So for that, I cannot answer. But probably you should have not this case in your database. I didn't check the code again. The documentation is sparse. Code, I don't know. So if you are interested in the answer, it's up to you. What was the second part of the question? OK, I don't remember the second part of the question. Why to not instruct client to redirect and fix header with proper location so it will not use the wrong one each time? And that's why I said I was lazy. I said no client storage for metadata in my demo because I was lazy. I'm using curl. I don't want to have a data store client side for the demo. But of course, that should be what you should be doing so that you even decrease the number of occurrences where good actors, not people who want to like mess up your architecture, but good actors just use the wrong lane. So yeah, that's what you should do actually. What if I need data from two different location owners to process a request? That's something I didn't show, but look, I can do something fun. I don't need the header anyway. Yeah. H is too much. Oh, I don't have, wait, what happened? Last time I did it, I got all my data. Probably changed the version. Last time I did it, I got all the data. And now I got only one part of it. I don't know. Again, I don't know what is coded in there. But you trust me, even though I'm French, last time I did it, I got the two records. So it was able to check the two records. Is there any hope for European clouds? Well, I hope so. However, it depends on the regulators. And most regulations come from Europe. I don't know if you are aware at the moment, but Twitter has become a shit show of propaganda and like disinformation or whatever. And it seems that finally the European Commission has decided, hey, we will do something about it, though they started an investigation. That's the problem of democracy, right? That's the problem of not living in an authoritarian regime, is all like actors, or most actors in the organization need to go toward the same goal. In order to have a European cloud, that's how I understand it, we need to have somebody who is able to convince others to go in the same direction. Remember what I told you about politics and organization and public and whatever? Well, if you want to be this person, I can try to support you, but I won't be this person. So I hope, but let's say I'm not sure it will happen. Does sharding only work by table column? Yes, as far as I know, there are multiple sharding strategies. So you can have a look at the documentation, because then I remember documentation. It's sharding sphere. And Apache sharding sphere. Learn more, docs, latest release. User manual, no. Dev manual, sharding. Data sharding, it's here. As you can see, that's the documentation I had to understand, right? If I tell you developers made the documentation, do you believe me? And it's probably automated. So here are all the available like sharding strategies. And I came up with my own. I don't remember where it is. Yeah, class-based. So now you can look at the documentation and you've got the code. So they probably are not searching, but probably they would benefit from a developer advocate. So if you need a job, you know what to do. Here. How is with caching of location for the read? I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you please rephrase it? Yes. Then probably you can control it because you are in charge of this code. So here I could add an additional layer of caching saying, hey, if you ask this thingy, just go there. But here I'm lazy. I just did it on the sharding value. Can you just outright reject query with, yeah, of course. Then you can like do you can do whatever you want. It's your algorithm, right? For me, I was like very straightforward, but yeah, you can do whatever you want. It's your code. Again, there are like a couple of regular sharding strategies, and most of them, again, are for real partitioning based on for scaling, whatever. Here, I'm using partitioning in a very, very restricted sense. And so I'm using my own algorithm. So you code your own algorithm, and you are good. I think you can also have composites. Now you can have a class-based composite algorithm, so perhaps you can first check in the cache, then check in whatever, and in the end you do whatever your business logic warrants you to do. I'm sorry I couldn't answer all the questions, but now you have seen with your own eyes that the documentation is interesting. I let you, if in case you want to check the code or whatever, I give you this to picture, and then I think our time is up. I really appreciated all your questions. Enjoy the rest of the conference. As I mentioned, I need to go, but if you need to ping me because you have additional questions, just be sure I'm available on those channels. Thanks a lot.